So it's good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're so happy that you could join us today. We're going to kick off this session looking under Dynamo's hood today with Jacob and Saul. I'm the community host, and let's do the introductions. I'm Sean Hurley. I'm the Autodesk Community Engagement Manager. I've been with Autodesk almost 24 years, and I was a customer prior to that, so a long tail of using Autodesk products. I love geeking out and doing things. Just received a 1980s era digitizer this week I'm pretty proud of. I'm in Oregon, so I'm moving to Bend, Oregon as of tomorrow. So I'll pass it over to Jacob.
Cool. So I am Jacob Small. I'm a designated support specialist focusing on generative design and BIM out of Autodesk's Boston office. I'm been with Autodesk about 3.5 years now. Prior to that, worked in the industry doing vertical construction projects in the architecture into things all throughout the North Shore of Massachusetts. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Saul. I'm the product manager for Dynamo. I like to describe myself as a curious human being, and I've been at Autodesk going on almost 3 years now. So ex-architect from the industry, working in various places around the world. Super excited to be here and talk about stuff under the hood in Dynamo today.
I'm honored to be in such good company. I mean, seriously, I am actually picking up some Dynamo skills. So before we start, we have some ground rules. Everyone's line is muted to remove the background noise. We invite you to turn your camera on so that we kind of get this sense of community. We get to see your face since we're not in the same room. If you have a question, either raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute, or you can use the chat and we'll call those out as we go through. Jacob and Saul are great about that. The session is being recorded and you'll be emailed a link. Next. This is the fun legal part. This is the safe harbor statement. Put it in a nutshell, what this is any decisions you make for Autodesk products, they should be in the state the products are in today in their shipping. If we make any forward-looking statements, things about the future, where Dynamo interjects AI and a little micro Jacob comes on your screen, that's only forward-looking. We're not promising that functionality actually come to fruition, although it would be cool. Little Swedish death metal coming across the screen. All right, next, please. The community conversations provide opportunities for engineers, designers, artists, and makers to meet in a safe, live, virtual setting, to share expertise, get to know leaders in your field, and grow your community network. It's important to note it is a community conversation, so let's keep it like that. They're always supported by the Autodesk community managers to help guide the conversations, feed important insights back from the community to Autodesk, and it supports the participants in getting connected to the expertise you need. And we're always looking for new speakers. So if you have the interest in leading one of these sessions, we would love to have you aboard. Let's kick it off to Jacob and Saul.
Cool, so welcome everyone. I'm glad to have you with us today. No matter where you are in the world, welcome. And today we're going to look at our 14th session in the Dynamo Office Hours series, and this is looking under Dynamo's hood. So there's a bunch of really interesting things that happen in Dynamo, and we're going to cover some of them today. So just one little caveat, we're going to touch upon a few things today, which we will dive into deeper in future sessions too. So as per usual, we're going to talk about a 20-minute presentation looking under Dynamo's hood. We're going to have a little bit of a live demonstration. Now, this is more of a technical nature today, less flashy than in the past, and then a Q&A session as well. And like always, please do ask your questions in the chat. We'll endeavor to answer them on the fly if we can, as well as having a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, we're going to go through a journey today on a bunch of different things that somewhat build upon each other. So what we're starting with is custom node flavors. So inside of Dynamo, you get the manifestation of custom nodes or content that comes in from the community, sometimes from the Dynamo team, in numerous different ways. And so what you'll see on your screen right now is the variations of this. So what we have circled in green is your standard custom node. So this is going to be made up of things such as out-of-the-box nodes in its entirety, could be a combination of Python nodes, could be a singular Python node, or any of the above. And this is demarcated typically like Windows has with the sort of the stacked folder structure that you can see in the green circle. So this is something that's very common. If you're downloading a package, most likely the package is going to be one of two flavors, and this is one of the common flavors. So then what we get into next is what we call zero-touch nodes. And the reason we call it zero-touch is that we build the framework that you need to be able to build the nodes, which means if you're wanting to dabble in something like C#, which is the language used to create zero-touch nodes, we do a bulk of the work for you, and you can focus on doing the good stuff. So these nodes are expressed inside of Dynamo as circled by the red. And that means that they're going to actually look similar to the out-of-the-box nodes that Dynamo ships. And this is because they are basically built in exactly the same way that we build the nodes inside of Dynamo. So we actually leverage exactly the same framework that we provide to you as a custom node package author if you're in C#. Then it gets a little bit funky. So there's actually a few different sort of flavors of zero-touch nodes versus what we call node model nodes. And technically the difference is that Dynamo treats them in slightly different ways. For a user, they effectively enable you to do some funky things with custom UI. So circled in blue here, we have a couple of different nodes that do things such as scatter plots. This is from the node models package, or from the salary package, we have the ability to do graph mapping and things as well. This allows you to interact with these nodes and actually click into that space and have them change their behavior when you do so. And then the one last funky thing is the design script nodes. So Dynamo actually has the capacity to also generate nodes through design script. This is caveated because a future session will cover design script, and also this feature is not complete. It's a legacy item that's existed for a long time and has some rather major flaws, but it exists, so I wanted to cover it. Next slide, please, Jacob, unless you've got anything to add first, by the way, as well.
Be very careful if you do go the design script nodes route. There's a lot of hidden little gems that are bugs as features in some cases, because you can do a lot of really cool stuff, but it can also take a long time to really get sort of set up so that it reproduces the way you want. So just exercise caution.
Yeah, the biggest bug in that space is the fact that if you save a graph with those nodes, they don't exist when you open the graph again. So not very functionally useful. Anyway, they're there. It's something that if it becomes more and more important to you guys on the call and the rest of the Dynamo community, it's something we could consider improving. So now that we understand sort of the general makeup of what kind of custom nodes exist, like what are actually the component pieces of this? Like, what and why would you want to use some of these different sort of expressions of how functionality comes into Dynamo? So the two basic buckets really are sort of zero-touch nodes, which includes those UI nodes we talked about, and the definitions. And they come with trade-offs. So the definition file, which is the sort of custom node experience that you might be familiar with, is sort of open, it's inspectable, it's educational. You can actually open up those nodes, double click on them, and actually see the inner workings of that node and understand the logic of what the user is trying to do. And if you want to, you can even copy those nodes back into your graph and actually use them inside of your graph without the custom node. So they're also very easy to create. There's a framework that enables you to create custom nodes and either save them on your disk or spin them up into a package which we'll talk about a little bit later, to put on the package manager. And they're also made inside of Dynamo. So the experience of creating a custom node is inside of the Dynamo experience, inside of the Dynamo IDE, so to speak, but they are limited in power as well. And so we'll get to that a little bit. And so inside of custom nodes, you get things like you see on screen at the top here, which is a Python script with just a couple of inputs and outputs. That's sort of the most concise approach to doing a custom node, but it also means that you have to understand Python. So in black on the lower right, you'll see this is some code in Python, and that might make sense to some of you and it might not make sense to some of you. Suffice it to say that if the code works and the package exists on the package manager that you can use, by all means do use it. But it is also an interesting way to start learning for the sort of more complex inner workings of how a custom node could work by jumping into Python as well. When you start to learn how to read the stuff, it levels up the complexity inside of a custom node, but not quite to the complexity level of a zero-touch node. So a zero-touch node, and you'll notice the things in yellow are sort of the negative aspects or the cons to these are closed, right? So you cannot see the inner workings of them. They do what they do. They'll have a description, some input ports, some output ports, but you do not get to double click on them and understand the logic that exists inside, which means they're pretty hidden. So it's a way, if you want to sort of hide your code, sort of protect your IP in a way, but they're also harder to create because you cannot create those inside of Dynamo, inside of the Dynamo experience itself. So in the lower left of the images, you'll notice this is the sort of essentials of a zero-touch node, very, very basic one. And the code required is a lot more particular than something like Python. But they are limitless. They enable things such as customized UI. They're made in a program called Visual Studio, and then they're imported into Dynamo. And this is the expression of how we do nodes inside of Dynamo. There's trade-offs with Python versus C# in terms of performance and power, but also in terms of expressivity and the ability to read them. And both of those approaches are both completely valid and completely awesome for different ones. All right, next slide, please. Cool. So now that we understand, the basic makeups of what custom nodes are, like the kind of flavors that we have and some of the trade-offs that we have with them, we can also look as to where we find these things. So what is the location for all of this content? So this content doesn't exist inside of your Dynamo install. It's something that is extended into your experience. And this is something you get from this thing called the package manager, which Jacob's going to talk about soon. So what happens with the custom nodes is they will express themselves inside of the library. So they will show up like magic for you after you install them. They'll come up under this add-on section. You'll notice this is just an expression of what I have in one of my installs of Dynamo. I typically run about 8 or 9 different versions of Sandbox and one version of Revit. And these are some of the nodes that I was playing with at that particular point in time, which is great. So most of the sort of the hard work is done for you. Technically, behind the scenes, what happens is that the roaming folder inside of this thing called appdata is where we will save your definitions. So when you download them from the package manager, Dynamo will save them to a particular place, and that particular place is where it goes to look for the definitions when you open up Dynamo, and that's what gives you access to that content in the library. But what you also can do is choose to have any chosen folder inside of your manage node and package paths, such as a central network location, to save Dynamo graphs. There are some issues surrounding central network locations that I'm sure Jacob can elaborate upon, but it gives you the ability to basically have not only that default location, but also other locations for your nodes or your graphs or your packages. Care to elaborate?
The big drawback with network path locations is around InfoSec, right? Your IT people who are in charge of making sure that bad things aren't happening on the network, and no one's getting ransomware, or you're not having viruses proliferate your system, want to make sure that people aren't executing arbitrary code across the network, because that's like flag number 1 for things you don't want to happen. And so technically, if you're putting ZeroTouch nodes up on that network, you are doing just that. There is some arbitrary code that's being run from one system off another system. So you want to be confirm with IT that this is going to be acceptable. They can actually modify the content to sort of whitelist, if you will, individual bits of code, but it does take that extra bit of management. So I do typically recommend just copying stuff down to the local disk periodically.
Yeah, and one way to do that is using this thing called robocopy, which is in essence taking a centralized folder that is managed by a singular person or a team, such as a bib manager, and then copying that to everybody's actual machine. And so that's one of the safest ways to go about. But we'll talk about sharing in a future session as well. Next slide, please. And before I hand off to Jacob, I just want to say one thing, and that is caution. So this is what it means to actually create a thing. So if you create a definition, in essence, you own that definition. So be that definition, be it local inside of your office, local to yourself, or something that you put on the package manager. So you are the gatekeeper to that functionality. Therefore, if you want to share something with the community that is awesome that you've created, like by all means do it. We thoroughly encourage that, but just be mindful that that is also something that people might turn into something they rely upon in the project, and that you have some degree of ownership when it comes to that code. Now, this can be ownership in a singular sense or ownership in an organizational sense. So for us in the Dynamo team, we take ownership of all of the nodes that we have, and if there's issues, we go and update them because we want you to have the best experience possible. And so the complexity of this definition also raises the difficulty of this thing we call technical debt. So this is kind of like the ownership. And so when things change over time, naturally as they do, technical debt arises, which is the need to go back and basically make sure the functionality that you created still works. So we have that on the team, we have that on Dynamo. When Revit changes or when Civil 3D changes something, we need to actually go and check every single piece of Dynamo to make sure that it actually works against every single thing that has been changed inside of those products. So we have technical debt because we decided to build a program called Dynamo, and that is just the nature of building software. And so building a little package is a little snippet of that, and sometimes that is really easy to do. The technical debt might be as simple as 1 minute, 2 minutes of just checking something just to make sure it still works, and sometimes it might be a little bit more complex. So one notion here is that the caution, be mindful of that, but also that sending something out via a package versus people copying package content into a graph also has trade-offs, like we discussed a little bit earlier with the package variations or the custom node definition variations. If you manage appropriately a package, it can be a 5-minute fix that actually saves you thousands and thousands of hours. If you're copying every single piece of Python into a graph, or you're copying a bunch of different nodes into a graph, it's much harder to update. The custom node experience has been designed so that you only really have to do that once. And then we get into the question, but what actually is a package? Jacob's going to take you through that.
So before we get there, I just want to highlight one more thing on this, the idea of copying the stuff out of custom nodes, because we see this all the time. I don't want to have to worry about somebody having to install, I don't know, clockwork in order to use this node. So I'm going to open up the node, copy the Python out, paste it into the graph, make a quick modification, and then send it over to the user who's going to run that graph. This means when they eventually get into a situation where they have a different level of list lacing, that's been stripped out of the capability. This means that if the Revit API changes, like we recently had the change from the Revit units API to the Forge units API in 2022, all of those nodes that relied on that stuff, now we need to go through and edit that code. So now you have to distribute it two places. And now you have to find everywhere that it's been put out, make that fix. It's going to be the user sort of knocking on your door every 15 minutes to say, hey, this is broken here, can you fix it? This is broken there, can you fix it there? And you just wind up chasing your tail. Whereas if you manage it through the package manager, yes, it's a little bit more time to set up in the beginning. Yes, it's a little bit more time to sort of teach users how to get going. But once you do that, this problem stops being a problem because you can leverage the tools that are there to make this happen. It's equivalent to basically saying, we're not going to use XREFs, we're going to take all the DWGs that we're referencing in, and we're just going to insert them as a link. And then every time that we need an update, someone's going to have to go through and modify that individual content for all the drawings in the entire project, right? There's a reason we don't do it that way. This is the reason that package manager's there. All right, on to why the package manager and how it works. So what is a package? A package is basically a collection of things. Looking at it in terms of the dictionary definition, package, spelled that way phonetically, it is a noun. There is a specific definition for computing. It is a collection of programs or subroutines with related functionality, right? A group of things that accomplish one thing. I went ahead and I made myself the nth definition of this as a noun specific to Dynamo. What this is, it's a collection of tools to help users build other tools, right? Your Dynamo graphs are going to be content that allows you to quickly execute a routine, do some automation, get into generative design, whatever it is. Packages are collections of tools that help users do that, right? So if we wanted to build this crazy crane, we'd probably need tools like a saw and a hammer, maybe a screwdriver, a wrench, perhaps work on the motor, and maybe one to give it a nice collection of paint. The package is that toolbox that all those tools come in, right? And you don't go and grab each individual part and parcel individually. You don't worry about sort of making sure everybody's carrying around their own specific, slightly different version of the screwdriver. You're just going to hand out the toolbox and let everybody take advantage of that. So let's look at what this looks like to be a package author. This is me. We're going to make it look a little bit more like me. Put the crazy beard and hair on there. I have made this amazing Dynamo graph that makes a happy little blue goat. And I want to get it out to you guys. And I'm assuming that somewhere amongst all the people who don't have the camera up is Pippi Longstocking. All right, so I want to give the goat over to Pippi. I can just hand Pippi the goat. Pippi's got the goat. This is great, right? She can go. And this is equivalent to, you know, doing an email exchange, a dead drop sort of file, inserting the XREF and binding it as opposed to actually linking it. But what if I wanted to actually make this, I don't know, a green goat or yellow goat instead? Now I have to go back and I have to modify Pippi's goat. So I could go and I could overwrite the previous version, and now she can use this other piece that does something else a little bit more in depth. All right, and this works. This is what a lot of people are doing right now with their packages. But what if I wanted to get it to a lot of people at once? Right? Yes, I could send out that goat to a lot of people, but what happens if I have more than just a goat? What if I had an entire zoo? Now I have to figure out about managing what color of each animal, which version of each one of these are sent to all of those users. There's a lot of things happening concurrently. Really, really impossible to find out. Did George get that update? Is Tippy on the latest version? I don't know, right? There's no good way for me to manage this, and users may wind up being too far behind or too far ahead as a result. So what a package is, it allows you to collect your Dynamo graphs, stick them in a box, close up that box, put a name on it. This is Jacob Zoo version 8.9.6, contains a lot of fun animals. That is my package. And now I can take that package and distribute it. This means that the users have the content that they need, and I can just check which version of the package are you using? We're a little bit behind. Let's go ahead and get that updated. Or, ooh, somehow you're ahead. Let me find out what the changes are. Maybe there's a reason that it broke, right? So it saves you the time and the hassle of having to sort of manage this on the back end. Let's take a look at how these packages wind up getting structured. So you can see here a snapshot of my app data roaming Dynamo Revit 2.3 packages folder. And this is one of the many different setups I have for Dynamo Revit. I think I have like 6 in one of my Revit years at one point. I may have pared that back to 3 or 4 for this, but this is the active one that I'm using right now. And so you can see within each one of those folders, I can open up the rhythm package, John Pearson's amazing package. And I open this one in particular because he's got all the content in here, which is really great. We can look at the specific content. We've got our bin folder. The bin folder is actually for all the referenced DLLs. I've highlighted it orange on the right and orange on the left, right? This is stuff for like ZeroTouch nodes, no model nodes with custom UI, sort of stuff that requires that external development application in order to make that work. From there, we've got our DYS. These are our standard design script nodes, custom, node arrangements where we've just taken standard nodes, Python nodes nested into our Dynamo custom nodes. Our extras folder. This is sort of the catch-all for everything else. This is our reference documents, our more code sort of reference sort of stuff, documentation, help files, sample files, things that show people how to use your particular package. I know the Dynashape package has some amazing examples in terms of how to work with that package directly, all packed into that extras folder, right? And then last but not least, we've got this pkg.json. That is the particular file that lets Dynamo know exactly what's happening in your package. So you can look it over and see what all that different content is, right? Which is really, really handy.
Yeah, and one thing to add, you'll notice coming in future versions, there's going to be another folder added here called a doc folder, which is going to be a particular expression of how documentation can surface from a package into Dynamo's UI itself.
Yep. Great point, Saul. All right, so now that we understand kind of what happens in there, oh, the other thing to talk about extra, and when we refer to sort of other reference documents, I know Rhythm actually ships an RFA for a 3D text family for one of the different nodes John uses. So literally you can pack whatever you might want into that extra folder, which is really, really cool. Over to you, Saul.
Cool, so back to me. So the package manager, it's like, you know, it's like a kitty in a candy store. You can go and browse and find some really fun things. So Jacob's now talked about what a package is, and the package manager is a way for you to go and get that content. So what you see on your right on the image is an expression of the package manager inside of Dynamo. And so you get to do an online package search, and that online package search allows you to find every single thing that exists in the package manager, including a bunch of pseudo-redundant tests by me and other people. So anything that has ever been uploaded on the package manager with a very, very, very few exceptions for GDPR is here and has been here forever. And so you're able to get this from in product through the package manager, which is just simply navigating to packages and search for a package. And then you get to search through a search field and get access to some sorting and filtering features too. The other way to get this is through dynamopackages.com, which is the website equivalent of this UI. And you can go and search for packages and do a manual install. And we'll talk about where you install it in a second. So when you sort by things inside of here, this is a cool way to go and sort by things such as, like, you know, what is the download count for these packages, like how many other people want this stuff or have this stuff, and then also things like ratings. So when people do the thumbs up and give it a positive rating. So the image is actually an expression of the rating, which shows that Synthesize Toolkit is the most popular rated package. And in terms of downloads, I believe it is now ArchiLab, which is the most downloaded package these days. And suffice it to say that it's pretty safe that if you want to find all of the cool things inside of Dynamo, you can go to the top 10 or 20 in either the download or the rating list, and that's what a lot of other people are going to be using. So go and have a look, go and have a play and explore those. But the caveat here is don't forget that somebody could release the most amazing package ever today or tomorrow, and it would not show up in either the most downloads or the highest rated list. So don't just think that only the things that are in the top of these lists are great, because there's really, 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 really amazing stuff out there that comes onto the package manager all the time. And then the other one is filter. And so filtering enables you to filter by things such as, what the host is. So this is like Revit or Civil 3D or Format and so on. But the caveat here is that host application is specified by the author. It's not something that we, the Dynamo team, have built functionality to automatically pass. So if a package is missing that, don't worry, you can still work on those things. If a package has that, it's just an expression or a way for the author to tell you more detail, more information about your package.
Great info there. There is a good question in the chat that I think we might want to cover. This is from, I got to make my window bigger so I can read it all. 1 second. From Christian Larson. Our IT department is still a little trigger shy without open the package managers. There's no IT locks they can put in place. Best encouragement that he can give them is that almost all people who use the player instead of working in the Dynamo workspace directly, and we train the graph creators in internet security. General question to the group: what is the security stance of your company, IT department, or client? That is a very, very broad topic. I work with a lot of companies, big, small, all over the place, and everybody's IT stance is really, really different around this stuff. For the most part, the code that you're consuming is the sort of code, right? DLLs, any DLL that you put on your system, your antivirus is going to scan, right? Yes, I could make stuff that's going to go sort of roundabout and make that happen, but your antivirus is going to pick that up. Same thing with Python. I was doing some work in standard Python environment last night, and I was running into stuff that my IT wasn't letting me do because it's like, yep, this is a potential security risk. Again, that idea of you can't call stuff from run arbitrary code off another machine on your local machine that we talked about earlier. The only way to really resolve this is to start having that conversation with the IT department. And if they're really worried about it, say, here's the list of packages that we need, go through and vet them, right? Or look at the larger community in terms of, right now, I'm confident in saying ArchiLab, Clockwork, Rhythm, there's no problems with those nodes. There's not a virus in those. Not to say that's always going to be the case, but it's definitely the case right now. So go ahead and put those on there and take advantage of them. Otherwise, you're going to wind up having to reinvent the wheel. And in AEC, there's a ton of code that's exchanged anyways. I mean, every time you go online, you're exposing yourself to an equal amount of code. If you're using Microsoft Teams or Zoom, right? We've heard about all the InfoSec security issues around our video chats and stuff like that. Like, it's not unique to Dynamo. It just feels more unique because users are intentionally leveraging code as opposed to just consuming code and not knowing. So.
Yeah, and I'd loop back to my comment. Like, you can leverage and lean on the community and the community validation of things, right? So if we're talking about the top 10 or 20 most downloaded, the top 20 or 10 or 20 most highly rated, that's a whole bunch of other people who've gone and done this exact same thing too. And like Jacob said, I think the safest way to make sure your IT department is happy with this is just to get them to download it and vet it themselves, and just make sure that there's nothing malicious about those. To Thomas's question about a virus scanner on the package manager, no, there's not a virus scanner on the package manager. The package manager is basically use at your own risk, and noting that comes with trade-offs. So the trade-offs are on the security front from that, mostly handled, like Jacob said, at the local machine level in terms of the Windows level, and the ability for us to use the content on the package manager is expressive and expansive because of that stance. And so when you signed up and use Dynamo for the first time, you'll notice there's a lot of terms and conditions, and basically it summates to, use at your own risk. But as we talked about, there's mitigation strategies, there's ways you can get around the concern that you might have around security of the package manager. And bear in mind that security is something that Dynamo and Autodesk take very, very seriously. and hence why we do security patches and updates for things in terms of Python and in terms of any other component piece that we use inside of Dynamo too. So it is something that Dynamo takes seriously. It's something that Autodesk takes seriously. It's something that the package manager is sort of sits in as a little bit of a gray area right now, but there's security on both the application level and also at the Windows level.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. On to use of the package manager. So Sol, when we were putting these slides together, Sol had that candy store analogy, and I absolutely loved it. So I built the Dynamo package manager candy store up there in the upper right-hand corner. And previously I was, as the distributor of my package, I was going around and I was sending the package to every individual user and saying, hey, what version are you on, so on and so forth. What we're going to do now, instead of me having to go user to user, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to push that package right up into the package manager. It is inside the candy store. Anybody can come and grab it anytime they might like. And that's actually what users do all the time, right? Go into the in-product package manager, go ahead and install the package. It gets put in the right location and things just work, right? It's amazing when this happens, and it happens at such a scale, phenomenal. I think we've actually passed something like 3 million package downloads, or maybe it's even 3.5 million, something crazy like that. And I remember when I first started, I don't think we'd even hit 1 million. So it's really taking off. And the other cool thing about this is, as I continue to go, if I decided to change from version 8.9.6 on my package, maybe I put some new animals in my zoo or whatever else, and I wanted to publish that version, I put that version up and the previous version still exists. So if there's been a change between Revit 21 and 2022 with, let's say, the Unit API, or a change in Civil 3D API, or I just wanted to introduce some new features that are not available in previous versions of Dynamo, we can go ahead and implement that, and users can then choose to go ahead and download the newer version, discarding their previous version as desired, right? So they can start to manage this at their own level to make sure it works for their current use, which is, again, the real benefit here of taking some of the onus off managing this on your own and training those users up how to hit that button and download the right version, which is pretty cool.
All right, cool. So we've sort of got a chicken and egg scenario going on here today in today's session. We were talking about a bunch of things that are all really interconnected. And therefore, we've talked about this notion of this thing called app data already, but now we kind of talk about it a little bit more in depth. So when you download packages from the package manager, now that we know what that is and what a package is and what goes into a package and all that good stuff, this is where Dynamo will download them to, if you simply do it yourself as per the package manager experience. So what it's going to do is it's going to download them to this thing called app data. There's an app data file location. So by default, both app data and program data, which I'm about to talk about, are both hidden files. But this is typically a place where applications such as Dynamo can put content that they need to use. So we have a few different expressions in app data of where these might show, and I've got a couple of them on screen right now. So Dynamo, Sandbox, and Format will actually install to exactly the same place. So if you download packages, you'll get the same packages on the same version. And this is installing to app data /roaming/Dynamo core or /Dynamo core. So the thing you'll see here in red. Too many slashes. Dynamo Revit has its own special package version. So if you say you're working in Dynamo Revit and you're working in Dynamo in Civil 3D and you're working in Dynamo and Sandbox and all of the places, and they're potentially all on the same version, you might have to have multiple expressions of the packages you want to use in those places, because each of those applications will look at a different place for this content. And then Dynamo Civil 3D's last example I have here is a little bit different. This actually goes under the app data roaming Autodesk folder in Civil 3D of whatever particular year you are working with, and has a Dynamo folder under that as well. So these are some of the places that you can get to find that kind of content. And you'll also be able to find some of the Dynamo Revit samples under this thing called program data, which is a similar concept, slightly different. Program data has a slightly different application to app data. Typically, app data is the location you'll go for this. And if you want to find these locations, you actually get to these if you go to the manage package paths and to find root directory. But you also can get to these by going into your Windows File Explorer and simply typing in percentage, appdata percentage, and that will automatically take you to the appdata roaming location, or you can type in percentage program data percentage, and that'll take you to the program data location. It's kind of like a keyboard, the pseudo keyboard shortcut, or a hack, or a fast track to get to that place. Cool.
All right, let's take a look at what's inside the DYN. We teased this with, we're going to peel back the hood, look at what's actually happening inside Dynamo, and this is where we're going to start to get to that. So this is a pretty basic graph, right? We've got a string node wired into a string replace node where we replace that entire string with something else, turn it all into a lowercase, find the length, pull the substring, so we're pulling each individual letter of the resulting replacement string, and then I use a bit of a dictionary to just convert each one of those letters into binary and then join it into one massive binary string, so we can start to speak like Neo in the Matrix or something along those lines. So what does this actually look like under the hood? If we were to just pull open Dynamo and really get inside, how would Dynamo see this? It's not going to see necessarily the ones and zeros. I mean, it is, but it's not really expressed that way. Instead, it's actually a type of text document, right? So these are JSON formatted documents, which have sort of 7 or 8 different, depending on how you look at it, chunks of data collection, right? So the first piece, and I've tried to color code it from top to bottom as we work our way down. First piece is important documents and settings information. We've got the unique ID of the graph up there. A flag that lets Dynamo know if this is a custom node or actual DYN instead of a DYF. The description for the node, which is null by default, but you can fill that out. The name of the node, I've named this one the world's emptiest DYN, and you can see that matches the file name by default. Element resolver map, which goes over how Dynamo's working with some of the core pieces of the engine under the hood. Don't mess with that. You can break stuff for the most part. Just leave that one be. And then we get into sort of flags. The next two are inputs and outputs. These are the flags that let Dynamo Player or Generative Design know that a particular set of nodes is either marked as an input, so it wants to be able to vary that at the user level, or an output, so it wants to report the results after you're done using that. Then it's got a list of all the different nodes that are on the canvas, a list of all the different connectors at number 4, a list of all the different dependencies, and Sol's going to talk more about this here shortly. Then we get into the bindings, and I had a AU session on bindings, and this is the piece that I'm going to be discussing here shortly. Element binding is the process by which, if you run the same graph a second time on the same file, instead of creating brand new stuff on top of the stuff you previously created, it's going to relocate the previously created content, adding more or removing from the end of the list as needed, which is a great way to sort of automatically update stuff. So if you wanted to, I don't know, you built a graph, let's say, that frames up all your steel, and then the building massing changed, so you had to adjust all the spacing on the steel beam slightly, and that's a huge pain. Just go ahead and run the same graph again if you've saved your element bindings, and all the steel will just shift into the new location. You won't lose the marks. You won't lose dimensions that are associated. You might lose some depending on how things get changed around, but it maintains more of your content, which is really good. And we'll talk about how to clear that out shortly. Number 7, the big chunk down there at the bottom in the big blue box is all the information about how the file is viewed. This includes some file control info in terms of what the scale factor is, has the graph run without crashing, is it visible in the Dynamo library in case this was a custom node, what version was used to write this, and that's actually a key flag if you're seeing users who can't get something to run. It may be that this is a Dynamo graph that was written for a newer piece than the version that they're trying to use. What the run type is, if you ever get stuck with a graph that's in periodic or automatic run mode and you just need to change it over, you can switch that flag there. And then the run period, if you're running a periodic run and you want to change the runtime from the default 1 second to something else, you can change that there as well.
One thing to note in the run period is conceptually you can get into an infinite loop scenario if you have your graph take longer to execute than your run period and you are in periodic mode. So if you ever get into that scenario where no matter what happens, if you try to open up your graph and it's in periodic mode, it kicks itself off and it never finishes that run before the periodic mode tries to execute again. As soon as that run finishes, it's going to kick another one off. So in essence, this is a pseudo infinite loop, which means you can't break it. If you get into that scenario, simply right click on your Dynamo file, click edit, in this case with Notepad or any other editing feature, and go in there and change your run period, or simply change your run type and change it back to manual. You should also be able to do this when you open the Dynamo file by clicking the sub tick box saying open in manual mode as well. So these are two different ways to sort of get around that kind of problem.
Yeah, the one thing with the changing the manual though, as soon as you change it back to periodic, it remembers the previous values. So that's why this is a good fix to know about. After that, we've got information on how the camera is actually exploring the background preview. So you can adjust that to be a plan view if that was something you were after, or an elevational view by just adjusting those values. It is always going to be in perspective, but can hack at that manually since there isn't a direct control. Monocle does have some great great features to adjust that though, so it might be worth going there instead of hacking at it on your own. Information on the different node views. View associated information for the nodes. Does the node produce geometry, or have we disabled the preview? Stuff like that. Information on all our different graph annotations, groups, and notes and stuff like that. And then last but not least, where the camera is positioned in the workspace. That is all the content. And this is, again, in the world's emptiest Dynamo file. This is what it looks like in the actual Dynamo file. So you can see I'm just going to quickly scroll through all this content, looking at how all that stuff maps over onto the other side. It is a lot, right? So it can be really difficult to sort of wrap your head around, but once you sort of know what to search for, you can sort of take care of that content. And again, here's how that content reviews. You can sort of see that graph, as tiny as it is, widened up with all of this text. So there's a good amount of content that's actually stored in there. All right, so I mentioned before, we're going to talk about how to remove bindings from a Dynamo file. So if you find your files running really slow and you don't understand why, oftentimes I've found that that's because there are element bindings saved into the graph, and Revit's going looking for items that don't necessarily exist because this is in your standard Dynamo player library or something like that. You haven't actually run it on most of the projects you're going to run, so you just want to clear that out. The way you do that, just search for the thing that's in the red box right there. Quotes, bindings, quotes, colon, space, square bracket, right? Once you find that bindings and quotes, if you don't have bindings, it will look somewhat like this. If you do have bindings, so this is no bindings. If you do have bindings, it will look instead something like that. You can see up here, it says bindings. It's a little bit blurry. I had to make that happen in order to get all of this stuff to fit on the screenshot, unfortunately. It is a lot of gobbledygook. That's actually double basing 64 encoded content. Effectively, all you need to know, if you want to get rid of your bindings, delete all the text in the binding section of the DYN. So it says bindings, find the square bracket, find the end bracket for that square bracket, and delete everything between the brackets. Literally just toss it. Everything that's in there, and the bindings will be gone. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to my AU session. You can just search the AU catalog for getting the good stuff out of Pandora's box. I think even just Pandora's box might pull up what you're looking for. I presented that back in AU 2019. There is a 90-page handout, if I'm not mistaken. So lots of information exposed there on that particular content. The other piece we wanted to talk about is workspace references, and I'm going to turn this back over to Sol.
Right. So I know Jacob touched upon workspace references last time when I was away on vacation, which was awesome, by the way. And the workspace references has been touched in terms of its functionality. And this is just really talking about closing that loop when it comes to the mechanics of workspace references. So what workspace references does is it understands what packages are loaded with the Open Graph and their version. So you'll notice in green here, this is what workspace references looks like today. In this particular graph expression, I have both the Clockwork and IronPython packages installed. And what Dynamo sees is all of the serialized information. So the information that's saved back to the DYN file that Jacob just showed. And that's what's covered in blue here. So this is sitting under this thing called node library dependencies, which is where we serialize the package information, and you'll get the name of the package, the version of the package, the reference type, and also the node's GUID. So the GUID of the nodes itself. So this is information that Dynamo simply goes and reads and checks the workspace. And if you don't have that package installed, but it is serialized into the graph, then you're going to get the red cross. And Workspace References then understands the GUID of that, and it allows you to go to the package manager and install that, which is great. So it bypasses that. What is cool is it gives you these 3 different trigger options. One is, yes, you've already got this installed. One is, no, you don't. Do you want to? And the third option is the one that Jacob probably covered last week, which is the option to either keep your existing package version or update to the newest package version, which is cool. Now, the image on the right is an expression of what we're moving to. So we're currently working on the Workspace References right now, and we're going to move into a place where not only do we capture package information, but we're also going to capture local definitions and external files too. So any single thing that Dynamo requires to run that doesn't exist inside of the DYN file, so it isn't serialized to the DYN file, is going to be now expressed and captured inside of the Workspace References. And the first pass is just going to showcase what it is. So you as a user get to choose to send that if you want to. And in the future, if you're familiar with the generative design experience, there's this notion of pack and go, so the ability to sort of bundle up a study and send it to someone else. We're going to incorporate a lot of that functionality into the Workspace References too. So future state is going to be fun. It's going to improve the sharing aspect of Dynamo and make it a much easier experience if you want to give your content to somebody else and have them run it successfully.
Cool. All right. That's that. We're into the demo time. I'm going to go ahead and pop open the question slides, because if anybody has any questions at this point, please feel free to take yourself off mute, speak up, put stuff in the chat. And we can go from there. In the meantime, I've got too many windows open. Sorry, guys. This is the world's simplest graph. Actually, this is the string conversion graph, not the world's simplest graph. So you can see Dynamo graphs are really just text, although I guess all files are just bytes. So we replace all that content. And so when I run this, we go from this one string over to this other one, convert everything over to lowercase, as I mentioned, get the length of that, build a range from 0 to 1 before the length itself, to create substrings for every single letter. And then from this dictionary of lowercase letter plus whatever the content might be for the binary string, to pull out all the individual binary values, join them into one watch node. Then I put this into the remember node and a data gate node as well, so we can talk about some other stuff. The way this looks, I'm going to actually go into my Notepad++ here, and we're going to go to, I think I can get it this way. Here we go. This is Dynamo file exploration.dyn. And you're seeing this in Notepad++. I'm going to zoom in so we can sort of see it. This is that first sort of upper section of the graph where we've got some basic information. You can see the name of the graph, the element resolver with it all the way filled out. Whether or not this is a custom node, description, I could fill this out if I wanted to. There's some interesting tracking stuff you can get into there once that's run within your office, if that was something you need. A listing of everything that's been marked as an input, a listing of everything that's been marked as an output, and then we get our listing of all the individual nodes. You can see each node has its own GUID. Each output on the node has its own GUID, and if I had a node with some inputs, we'd see a different ID GUID for that input as well. So there's GUIDs all over the place, and this is how the Dynamo file starts to refer back from one location to the other. I don't have any bindings in this particular file, but we could continue to sort of scroll down through here and look at all these different nodes. But again, for the most part, what I typically find people wind up getting in here for is just search for binding. And that will bring you right to this section. And the key is whatever might be in this chunk of data right there, just go ahead, highlight it all, everything in between those square brackets. This is where Notepad++, with the auto highlighting of the associated in bracket is really, really handy, right? Like if I click here, we can see the Dynamo section of this file ends down there. The view section ends all the way down here. And some of those bindings are going to be potentially much longer than this. Of course, now that I've found that, I can't find bindings again, so we'll hit search. Back here, I'm just gonna look where that bracket starts, look where that bracket ends, hit delete, hit save, and that would remove the bindings directly from the file. So that's that. Workspace reference data, as Sol mentioned, would go right in here as well. And that's pretty much everything I had. I know we've got 10 minutes left. There is a PowerShell script to remove bindings from many files as well. And I think it may still be up there. I don't know. I had a Dynamo graph that removed bindings as well. Also helped you serialize them out. At some point, I might get back into, I was trying to write a custom node that would move the Dynamo element bindings for Revit into the RVT file so that you could keep the Revit file nice, but still reassociate content after the fact if you wanted. But great call out on the PowerShell script on the Dynamo form, Thomas.
Cool. So do we have any questions? I know there's been a lot of stuff, but this is kind of a bit of a jump from the previous series, which were sort of, gentle introduction to Dynamo and the things that make up Dynamo. This one get a little bit technical. But if you have any questions, please do feel free to unmute and ask or put them in the chat. We'd be more than happy to answer them. And if there's any questions just generally about Dynamo, it doesn't have to be about what you saw today. We'd be more than happy to answer those too. Okay, so we have a question from Tora in the, when it comes to editing Dynamo files, what are your preferred developer tools? Text editors, linters, test environments, etc. For me personally, I just use a text editing tool if I edit them. Jacob, how about yourself?
I go straight to Notepad++ for editing my Dynamo files. Actually, I do far more review of Dynamo files on my cell phone than probably is healthy for my eyes. That's one of the ways I'm so active on the Dynamo forums is I've learned to just open it up and sort of understand what's happening to some extent. It definitely helps to be able to see it in the actual Dynamo environment in some cases. But if there's a flag that I know, like, what's the engine, right? I can get that pretty quick. I can get the bindings pretty quick. But yeah, Notepad++. The other thing I find I'm doing a bit with that is design script replacement too, right? Where people may or may not have had necessarily the correct namespace callouts that you can leverage. Is there a code highlighter for Notepad++ for Dynamo files? I just use the JSON if I used it. A lot of times I'll just use the I forget what they call it, where you highlight this and it's going to show it everywhere in the document. And of course I don't have a great piece to show that at the moment because of where I am in the file, but connectors piece should have a little bit more activity on showing how stuff associates it.
Yeah, as we're talking, so the Dynamo DWAN file is a JSON file format. So that means any online JSON editor that you want to use, you can simply, I think it's like JSON Online or something, you can simply post it in there as well. And it's going to collapse those fields that you don't need for you. So anything that can interact with a JSON file is something you can use with your Dynamo file too.
Yeah.
Cool. We have a question from Adam. Oh, sorry, Jacob.
I'm just showing, like, yeah, you can collapse this stuff down. It's not necessarily great because it may, in some cases, overcollapse, but it does the trick. Sol, do you want to take that question from Adam? Right.
Okay. So Adam has a package that he published with a company-specific Autodesk account, no longer uses that account, wants to republish updates to the package using the main account. Is there any way to move what I published before, or is that forever stuck to the old content? Short answer is it's stuck up there unless you, for sort of GDPR reasons, want to remove it. But what we can do is we can add another maintainer to that package. So if you have another email address that you want to use and you yourself are maintaining your own package, you can reach out to us. And we can get that done for you. It takes a couple of days or something. We have to get it in the backlog with the team, but it's very easy for us to do too. So in that instance, we usually just request verification that the individual looking to maintain the package is in fact, or does in fact have permissions to do so. So for example, there's a Woods Bagot package that we had new maintainers added who have joined the company, given the original authors of that package had moved on, but the original authors gave permission in that instance. So Adam, in your particular case, if it's yourself in both instances, then that's easy to verify.
Okay, I think we're down to the last 4 minutes, so we'll go ahead and wrap. Sol, what do we got coming up?
So we have a couple of awesome sessions coming up. So first of all, we're going to have dinner with friends. In this case, this is going to be talking about the Dynamo player and sharing. So this is going to be focused around how do you make all this really cool stuff and get other people to use it. This is going to have both Jacob and myself, but also a special guest with Dana DeFilippi, which is going to be awesome. She uses the Dynamo player extensively and is super awesome at all things Dynamo player. Then we're going to take a brief break for August. So this is a vacation for all of you people in the Northern Hemisphere. This is just a gentle wind down for a month. And then we're going to ramp back up when it comes into September, and we're going to start talking about design scripting, all the things. So getting into the nitty gritty of how design script works and how it plays with nodes. And then just before AU, we're going to jump into AU sessions of note, where Jacob and I are going to have a more sort of paired back, laid back session where we're simply just going to talk about some of the cool things happening at AU, particularly focused on Dynamo and things like generative design. And we can just have a general open forum question on that one. And then there's more to come further down. So that's going to round out, well, there may be 1 or 2 more sessions that'll round out the rest of this year, and we have intentions to do this again next year as well.
All right, gentlemen, that was awesome. I mean, we covered goats, we covered zoos, candy stores, Pippi Longstocking. I mean, I don't know what else I can do there. And you guys are so good at grabbing the questions throughout the session and minding that it's a conversation. So thanks again. We will wrap up today's session with 2 final slides. If you look, and thanks, Kate, for posting a lot of those links in there to find out what's on the calendar. We have a few resources. You can explore the various Autodesk communities, including the global network of user groups in the Autodesk Group Network, our industry-focused communities that are helping your colleagues solve business challenges together, the Autodesk forums, of course, and staying connected with us on Twitter. Jacob's on there, Saul's on there. It's awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for everybody who attended, and also, Jacob and Saul. You guys are awesome. This is fun. It's enjoyable. It's entertaining. I would have never seen the blue goats coming. So I hope you'll be with our next one with Dana and Jacob and Saul, and then be back with us in September. So thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. Absolute pleasure as always. Enjoy your evening, day, morning, night, whatever it may be.